surviving the chaos of digital transformation, how APIs are the key to agentic AI, and how to start an AI tech company. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 236 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, the tech agnostic podcast that covers everything you need to know about digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy sides of change. This is the podcast that comes out every Wednesday with new episodes. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see past episodes and to keep up with current episodes. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, who is also the sponsor of this podcast and is a tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And joining me, as always, is Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah, this will be a fun episode, a little bit different format or different topics here we'll cover today. We're going to open things up with some social media questions. We'll get into some newsworthy topics, one being NVIDIA's AI enterprise, adding generative AI microservices, and also how APIs are the key to agentic AI. And then after that, we'll get into a discussion around my new book called Welcome to the Jungle, How to Survive the Chaos of Digital Transformations. That's the subtitle. So we'll talk about some of the themes of that book, give you a preview of that book, and talk a little bit about what you can expect when it does come out here in September. And then last but not least, later in the show, we'll have a couple of guests join us to talk about how to start an AI tech company and how to scale up a company, taking it from an idea and in inception all the way through growth and private equity and success and all that good stuff. So we're going to talk to two tech founders that have started an AI company, and we'll talk about some of the good, the bad, the ugly of their journey so far. So that'll be a great conversation, something very different that we haven't covered in this podcast before. So exciting stuff. But before we get into all that, what are some of the social media questions you've got in store for us, Darian?
Yeah, a few good questions today. This first one is, I think the life cycle of R3 is far too short. Imagine if you decided SAP R3 in 2013, planning, customizing, implementation, etc. takes years, if not decades. A large corporation might have perfected that system after 10 years, and then the vendor comes along and says the system will soon be discontinued. That should switch to the successor, or that you should switch to the successor of that system. Please, what? ? Can you just name one reason or advantage I would have from this now that the system is finally stable and we're in the ROI phase?
That's a great question, and I would have to defer to SAP on that one. Just kidding. But no, kidding aside, it is a really good point, and it's a really it's an unfortunate point too, because it's a lot of companies are stuck in this predicament right now where they just haven't gotten the value out of R3. We have one client in the Midwestern United States. It's a newer client of ours that we just started with in the last few weeks, and they came to us and said, one of the things they told us when they first reached out to us a few months ago is that they had just finished a multi-year implementation of ECC. So that's R3 is the older version of SAP. ECC has been around for 20 years or so now. And then, of course, S4HANA is the new flagship product, or the newer flagship product for SAP. But they had gone through this 5 or 7 year journey to get upgraded to ECC. And before the last locations were even up and running, SAP was already trying to convince them to upgrade to S4HANA, but they had a business case that had I think a 7-year horizon or something, like 7 years to get their payback and to start to get an ROI on it. And they were only 2 or 3 years post implementation in a lot of the business, and they were already being told that they needed to upgrade, even though they hadn't gotten the business value. what I would love to say, if I were a snarky customer right now, what I would say is, yeah, I'm excited to upgrade S4 HANA as soon as I get the business value to justify that investment I already made in my old product. That would be my response to SAP. And if they can't see why you would do that, then you have to wonder, is this the right partner for me? And it's unfortunate because I think SAP, I think I've mentioned in this podcast before, SAP, I think, is overplaying their hand, and I think it'll come back to haunt them strategically in a big way. I think it's going to hurt them very significantly in the industry. I don't think they'll be the incumbent number one ERP vendor for long as a result of it. I think someone's going to come and destroy their market share because the way they operate. They're acting like the traditional outdated company with a lot of arrogance that thinks they can do whatever they want. They remind me of, in fact, I'm going to do a video on this in my next batch, comparing SAP to BlackBerry. If you remember the company BlackBerry, there's a documentary that came out recently about it too, where BlackBerry was just convinced that Apple was wrong with their invention of the iPhone. They were convinced that everyone needed a keypad on their smartphone, and that a phone without a keypad was just blasphemy. It was just ridiculous that anyone would want a phone that doesn't have a keypad. And now, of course, 95% or more of people with smartphones have no keypad. They use a touch screen. So it's that sort of arrogance and that blindness to the fact that there are other competitors out there that might be able to do something better. I think that's going to haunt them in the long term. But that's a long way of saying, I think as a business owner and a business executive or leader, you have to make sure you get the business value out of what your investments are. And if that means you need to sweat the asset for a little bit longer, then sweat the asset for as long as you need. You've got other options with third-party support and whatnot. So don't let SAP tell you what timeline you should be operating on, because really it's your timeline, not theirs.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. Our second question today is kind of a question, kind of a statement. Want to get your take on it. It says, I would absolutely love to see how AI deals with buying an ERP implementation from Accenture, Deloitte, etc. Can you imagine ChatGPT trying to negotiate with a tier 1 partner? AI can't even get a list of court case law right and recommend someone replace sodium chloride tablet salt with sodium bromide. AI is very, very stupid and not to be trusted at all. It's all hype. Just wanted to get your take on this, see if you agree, disagree, where you're at.
I think AI is like a young toddler. They've got some strengths. They're cute at times, but then at other times they're a complete nightmare, especially if you let them do whatever they want. So yeah, they're going to throw their temper tantrums and they're going to wig out at times. But I think there is value there. I think you just have to know how to manage it, know how to get what you need out of it. Even in the future, that might be a moot point. I mean, it might actually be able to do what you're saying and actually do the back and forth negotiations. I imagine there's probably a way to do it now with Agentic AI, and if you set it up right and use the right data to train it. But the problem is there's not a lot of good data to train it. In fact, we're in the process of training our own AI model based on our historic consulting engagements, just to be able to teach AI, some of the nuances of what makes a digital transformation successful. But it's a work in progress for sure. So I agree, you can't let AI do its own thing. AI is kind of stupid if you don't pay attention to it. What's kind of funny but not funny is just yesterday, a client sent, there's a small team and I that are working with this one client, and they got an assessment, like a readout on an assessment for their current software vendor. Because our current software vendor is the incumbent, and this client is looking at replacing that software vendor. So the software vendor says, hey, hold on, before you bring in these independent diagnostic consultants, we'll do a free assessment of your system and kind of what it would take to upgrade to our newer system. And so we get the document back. They sent it to us, and I could tell they used ChatGPT to create it, because it said, they left in the little remarks about how, how when you do a prompt in ChatGPT, it'll give you the answer, and then it'll tell you at the bottom, like, what it could also do for you. Like, if you want me to do this, this, and that, just let me know. And they left that language in there. And I'm like, okay, well, speaking of stupid, it's the humans that are stupid. If you ask me, that wasn't AI being stupid. That was the human being stupid for taking a cut and paste from AI, plugging it into a document, sending it out as this custom report and assessment that they did for the client, when clearly they used ChatGPT for it. So I think the humans are more likely to be stupid, but AI isn't perfect, especially if you're not paying attention to it. So I think you've just got to be smart about how you use it, and don't give up your own human brain and common sense that needs to be uh, you know combined with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of AI, both of our newsworthy articles today are going to touch on AI in some way. So I want to get into the first one, which is all about NVIDIA and their AI enterprise and how it adds, how they added generative AI microservices. So they just rolled out Enterprise 5.0, and it's all about these generative AI microservices that companies can use. So there's two main buckets. The first is NIM microservices to speed up deployment of AI apps, cutting timelines from weeks to minutes. Tools like Triton interface server and Trenzor RT LLM make it easier to scale large language models without deep coding. And then the second main microservice is Kata, I think, Kata-X. And that microservice is for handling data prep, training, and optimization with apps like QOpt for logistics, Riva for speech AI, and Earth-2 for climate simulations. These services integrate with major clouds like AWS, Google, Azure, and frameworks like LangChain, Llama, Index, while also connecting to enterprise data platforms like Box and Cloudera. Bottom line, NVIDIA is building a standardized layer for running AI across clouds, data centers, and PCs. Developers can tinker for free, while enterprise license start at $4,500 per GPU per year. Eric, questions for this. How does NVIDIA's microservices approach change the way that enterprises may adopt AI compared to traditional platforms?
Well, I think that's really interesting. I hadn't heard this story before, this use case of how they're using it. But I think microservices is something that we don't talk a lot about on this show, and even with our clients, a lot of times it's more focused on agentic AI and generative AI and sort of those big buckets of use cases, more at the user level, at the business process level. But a lot of what this is talking about and what this is getting into is how AI can be used not even as a complementary supplement to an ERP system or to a core back office, but how it can essentially replace that. So if you've got the data anywhere in any sort of database, it sounds like you might be able to use these microservices to be able to call on that data and to transact that data in ways that an ERP system would or historically could, and replace that. And that's why I've been saying for a while now that I think AI is going to completely screw up the ERP software space and the enterprise technology space in general. And when I say ERP, I'm talking about not just big traditional all-in-one ERP systems. I mean like Workday and CRM, HCM, supply chain systems, BI and reporting systems. I think all those traditional historic categories of enterprise technologies are at severe risk right now, because I think microservices could replace that quite a bit. We had on the show actually a few weeks ago, and then actually this week at Digital Stratosphere, which is happening as we speak, one of the speakers at the event at Digital Stratosphere, and also that's been on this podcast before, is Jan Bond. And he talks a lot about AI and microservices and how these microservices can potentially replace ERP solutions or be an alternative traditional ERP system. So, and keep in mind, Jan Bond is a guy that created or helped create the entire category of ERP systems as we know it today. And now he's one of the ones leading the charge to destroy it, which is super fascinating to me. But I think he's doing it for a good reason. He's not doing it because he's a destructive person by any means. He's doing it because he sees the future and he sees what's happening and what's possible with these new technologies. And the beauty of what you're describing there and what NVIDIA is doing is that it's giving their customers and is giving the market in general a lower cost, more flexible, and just a more custom tailored option for companies. Instead of trying to force fit their operations into a standard off the shelf system, now you can be using these microservices to tailor the technology, but still use proven technologies in a way that's going to be totally unique to you. It's probably going to be lower cost. It's going to be less disruptive. and it can give you more of a competitive advantage now because you can create this technology in a way that's very tailored to you, and it's harder for someone else to replicate if they don't have the secret sauce of your business behind it.
For sure. And with NVIDIA positioning this as cutting deployment time from weeks to minutes, is that realistic in real world transformation projects?
I think it is, although I will say that what it's going to do is it's going to speed up the cycle time for technology deployments, but it's not going to speed up the overall transformation time. You're still going to have to deal with the way you change your processes, the way you structure yourselves, the way you design and create people's jobs. That ends up becoming what digital transformation is all about. You know, the AI stuff now, if that can ease the pain of the technology part of a project, which has always been the least difficult part of most transformations, is the technology piece. But now with these microservices, I think it makes technology even more easy to deploy, especially relative to the other stuff, which is how do we change people? How do we change our processes and all that stuff? So as of right now, at the time we're recording this podcast, AI has not replaced the need for or completely automated the way humans adopt new technology. It's given us tools to help with it. It's helped us, for example, create more customized and tailored training materials and reference materials online that we can draw from to help us do our jobs. And even AI can even help us complete a transaction in a system, that sort of thing. So there are ways that AI can make things easier, but we still have to connect the dots between what the technology can do and what the humans are actually doing day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to connect to something you said earlier, you said we talk more about agentic AI maybe with clients more often. Our next newsworthy article is going to actually be about the APIs and how they are key to agentic AI. So with that, today, if you look at AI, like any AI model today for agentic AI, they're pretty good at talking, but not great yet at doing. And that's where the APIs come in. So CIOs are calling APIs the glue that will make agentic AI real. Instead of just generating answers, agents connected to APIs can schedule meetings, update CRMs, process claims, or even manage logistics. Rebecca Fox at NCC Group says, without APIs, agentic AI can't orchestrate processes across systems. Doug Gilbert at Sutherland Global adds that APIs let agents autonomously invoke functions to access data, execute tasks, and drive workflows. We're already seeing some early examples of this. So Capital One's Chat Concierge uses APIs to compare vehicles and book dealership appointments. Healthcare companies like Transcend are using Salesforce Agentforce with APIs to validate prescriptions and keep customer reps compliant. So the promise with this is looking big, but roadblocks are obviously real. Most APIs were poorly documented. Legacy systems create friction, and security is a major concern. Nearly 95% of API attacks come from authenticated users, meaning AI could expand existing vulnerabilities if not carefully managed. Standards are starting to emerge with Anthropic's MCP protocol, Google Agent to Agent Spec, and the Arazo standard for multi-step API flows. CIOs believe that these agents will move from passive observers to active doers. Or as Rory of Gravite puts it, APIs are a lifeblood of agentic AI. Without them, agents remain observers rather than doers. Again, so Eric, with all of that, do you think CIOs are ready for AI that doesn't just like analyze, but actually acts across their systems?
I don't know if they're ready, but it's a super fascinating reality. Back to the earlier point about how AI and microservices could potentially replace ERP systems. This is another way that AI could potentially replace ERP systems, or the need to change out your enterprise technology. Because now if you've got microservices, or I'm sorry, not microservices, you have APIs that can tie to AI agents, across your different technologies. That gives you a way now to be able to do things more efficiently without humans having to do that, which was what the problem was in the past. Is when you had multiple systems, now humans have to transfer data back and forth, and that just is labor intensive and costly and subject to risk and mistakes and errors and all that good stuff. But now with AI, that's a better solution in many ways. Now the risk, though, is I think from a more of a cybersecurity perspective, I think there's a cybersecurity risk. The more APIs you build, the more systems you're touching, the more vulnerabilities you've opened up. Because now, if, instead of consolidating to one secure system, you still have your 10 or 12 or 15 legacy systems, and AI APIs are going back and forth between those technologies. That's just creating a risk that could cause an issue across your entire tech stack. So cybersecurity becomes an increased risk at this point, but that's just a natural trade-off. Any of these decisions you make are going to have some sort of trade-off you're going to have to make. So that's one thing to consider. And then, of course, if you've got such outdated technologies like an old mainframe or some janky system that's barely able to keep the lights on, then AI APIs are not going to fix that for you. So if that system goes down, then the APIs and the AI pieces of it are worthless. So there are still risks, but if you've got a good enough system that isn't quite near end of life or still has several years left, you might as well look at AI and APIs as well as microservices that we talked about before. You might as well look at both of those paths as a potential option to push out a big investment. Because if you can avoid spending millions of dollars right now and push that out into the future, software vendors will tell you, well, that's technical debt. You're just pushing out a problem to later. Well, okay. In the meantime, though, you're getting a ton of value and you can invest your money in other things. And why go through the pain and chaos now if you could be doing something, more effective, more strategically? So that's the way I'd look at it.
Yeah. And in your opinion, do you think that security is the biggest risk that companies have to consider, or would the biggest risk maybe be something like governance and data quality? Would those be bigger risks?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the more probable, I'll say it this way, the more probable likely risk is data integrity issues, because now you've got multiple systems, and if the data is dirty in one system, it's just going to muck up the data in other systems. And now granted, you could use AI to clean up some of that data. So that's another use case for how AI could help with that. But let's assume that your data is corrupt, then you're just exasperating the problem now by integrating it to other systems. But so that's probably the most common risk, but the bigger impact risk, but even though I'd say it's lower probability but higher impact, would be cybersecurity. Because now you've opened yourselves up, and if you do have a cybersecurity attack, that can be much more disruptive than a data integrity issue. Both are problems, but one of them is going to be more widespread, less disruptive. The other one's going to be less common, but more disruptive.
For sure. And do you think that companies right now are really comfortable letting AI trigger actions like payments or scheduling without human approval? Or do you think there will always be some sense of human approval?
I think in the short term and intermediate term, maybe even there'll be some need to, continue that oversight. And someone's going to have to continue to watch that, because, it doesn't take much to trip up an AI model or to teach it something wrong or have it misread a situation. So I think you have to have human oversight, at least for the way we know AI right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question, in the long term, do you think that APIs make agentic AI inevitable, or is this still more hype than reality today, and we're just all kind of seeing what is going to work?
I think, there is a lot of hype behind it for sure, but I think there's a lot of potential with agentic AI. I think the biggest barrier, honestly, I think the biggest challenge is going to be the pricing models that the software vendors put on top of agentic AI, because already you're starting to see people are starting to recognize well, if I am providing this value, me being a vendor, hypothetically, if I'm providing value via these agentic AIs, then that's another revenue stream for me. So I can save you all this money with agentic AI. So I'm going to start charging you for every AI agent you create. And so there's a pricing model now that is that a lot of vendors are using to add to basically increase their revenue stream. So that's going to slow down adoption to some degree. I think the bigger one, I forgot where I heard or read this, and I don't. It's not based on any sort of fact. It's more of a speculation. So take it with a grain of salt. But I think it's a very it's a reasonable speculation, I'd say, and that is that at some point, if AI starts disrupting job security for people in mass, to where certain governments start to step in and say, okay, we're going to actually start taxing AI agents. That's interesting too. Like, are you going to put a tax on companies that use AI agents because you've displaced jobs? I could see that becoming a real thing in many governments throughout the world. So I don't know. There's things like that. I think it's more external, though. I think the things that could slow down or prevent adoption are not related to the fact that AI can or can't do the job. It's more the financial component, vendors potentially charging too much, governments potentially taxing it. And then, of course, people are going to resist it to some degree, at least in the short term, until they get comfortable. And they may never get comfortable with AI, especially if there is a chance they might lose their jobs. So I think there is a lot of headwind, but it's not because there's just overhype necessarily behind agentic AI. I think it's a real thing. I mean, I think the potential is real, but the dark side is also real, and that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's super interesting to talk about, and we'll definitely continue to watch it in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to talk a lot more about AI later in the episode. Starting with the next segment, we're going to get into a preview of my new book called Welcome to the Jungle, and how to survive and navigate chaos in digital transformations. And part of that book talks a lot about AI, in addition to other types of enterprise technologies, other types of digital transformations. So we'll talk about that here in the next segment. And then later in the show, we will have two tech founders on, Will and Xenon, from a company called Octar AI. It's an AI tool and company that we partner with. We actually use their technology in our consulting delivery and offering. So we're going to talk to them about the life of a startup. What's it like starting an AI tech company, and what have been their biggest hurdles? What's made them successful? What are they doing in the future? All that good stuff. So we'll get boots on the ground view of inside an AI tech startup. So stay tuned for that. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. I want to invite you to join me and other thought leaders in the digital transformation space to Stratosphere 2025. It's an annual conference we've hosted now for 7 years in a row. It's a great event. It's live in Denver, Colorado, but we're also offering it virtually via hybrid tickets. And we're going to have a lot of different speakers here, including myself as a keynote, as well as others that you may know from the industry. And this is a perfect conference if you're interested in any sort of digital transformation, including ERP and CRM and HCM. And actually, the theme for this year's session is AI, and how AI is affecting all different types of digital transformation. But in addition to AI, we'll also talk about the fundamentals of digital transformation, including program management, evaluating the right software, digital strategy, change management, process improvement, all the things you need to know to make your project successful. It's also a great way to network and learn from others. So just being part of a community that is also like-minded and going through the same things you are, that's another value. And you can join, like I said, remotely, in person, and you can also buy VIP tickets if you'd like more exclusive access to me and others from the Third Stage team and other speakers that are going to be there. So I hope to see you soon. Check out my discount code below for discounted tickets. You can go to stratosphere2025.com for more information, including the full agenda, and I hope to see you there.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
With 1,000 eyes and a good disguise, hit 'em right between the eyes, hit 'em right between the eyes. When you walk away.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 236. My name is Eric Kimberling with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also see past episodes of the show at that same website, transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also subscribe, listen, watch wherever you want at that website as well. So excited for this next segment. So a lot of people don't know this because I haven't publicized it a lot. This is really the first, I think this is the first time I've publicly put a line in the sand and said my new book is coming out and it's within the next 30 days. I don't have an exact date yet, but it's going to be early September sometime. But in the meantime, the book is complete. It's with the publisher now, and it'll be out very shortly. And in the meantime, wanted to share and give a preview of that book. I'm also going to be this week here at Digital Stratosphere. I'm giving a keynote at our annual conference here in Denver. We're also streaming it virtually. But in this conference, I'm giving a preview, a more formal preview of it. But I thought I'd share with the listeners here today some of the findings from the book and see what questions you have, Darian. So, Darian, thanks for being here with me to walk through the book today.
So congratulations on your second book. It's such an accomplishment. And I'm excited to hear more about it. I guess one question I have for you, Eric, starting to talk about this book is why did you want to release a second book now? And what inspired you to write it?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I had written the first book, which is called The Final Countdown. And if you go to thefinalcountdown.com, it'll take you to the page where you can order the book. You can read reviews of it and whatnot, learn more about it. But I'd written The Final Countdown is sort of an overview of digital strategy, how to define a strategy and roadmap and how to just basically figure out what direction to go for your initiatives. And then I actually had a lot of trouble figuring out, with such a broad topic like digital transformation or leading change, how could I create something that was different and focused? And I had a lot of trouble because at first I wanted to be heavily focused on change management and focused on that discipline of change management. But then I decided, I feel like I need to back up a little bit and focus more on sort of the train wrecks and what causes a lot of those failures. And a lot of it is related to change management, but there's a lot of other stuff as well. So I decided to reframe it a bit and focus more on a case study format and looking more broadly at what causes failure and what causes success. So, the reason for a second book in general is just because I wanted to follow up The Final Countdown with something more, a little bit more case study driven and a little bit more detailed. Final Countdown, I would consider more of an introduction to digital strategy, whereas Welcome to the Jungle is going to go deeper into case studies and examples and showing what works and what doesn't in digital transformation. So it actually took me a lot longer than I thought. I wanted to have a new book out last year, and I ended up rewriting, kind of scratching what I started and rewriting it and reframing it. So that's why now is the time, and it kind of coincides with our Stratosphere 2025 next week as well, and that's why this will be the first time I'm previewing the book. Is in that keynote presentation next week.
For sure. Yeah. Timing always has a funny way of working out, I guess, perfectly with Stratosphere coming up next week. Yep. I love the title of the book, Welcome to the Jungle. What made you choose that title? Where do you pull that from? What's inspiration? And what does it represent in the context of digital transformation?
Yeah, well, the Final Countdown was named, it's kind of a double meaning, one is related to the song, The Final Countdown. And I'm a fan of classic 80s rock. And I had to figure out what's another good song title that would relate well to digital transformation. And actually Welcome to the Jungle was the first one I thought of because, if you heard the song, it starts off pretty intense and, he says, welcome to the jungle, you're going to die. And it's very dramatic. Obviously, you're not going to die in a digital transformation, but, that song from Guns N' Roses, I think just sort of represents what a lot of companies go through and a lot of the intensity and just bizarre stuff that happens in projects. And so I felt like it was a good, memorable title that would sort of represent what the book is about, which is it's a jungle, it's chaotic, it's a mess, or it can be a mess if it's not managed well. So let's accept the fact that it is a jungle. You are going through a journey that's got pitfalls, there's risks, there's wild animals, whatever isn't. I've actually never been to a jungle. I don't think. So I don't even know what's in a jungle, but all the stuff you would stereotypically expect to see in a jungle, it's going to be there. You can't avoid it. So the key is then how do you navigate it? How do you prepare yourself for it? And how do you avoid the failure that so many companies struggle with?
For sure. And speaking of the failures, like you said, this book is based on a lot of more case studies compared to the first book. And you have obviously worked on hundreds of transformations. What are some of the most common pitfalls that you see that motivated you to create this roadmap book for businesses?
Yeah, as far as the causes of failure, I mean, like what are the causes of it?
Yeah,
I mean,
like what are the common pitfalls you see that, businesses experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something I've actually wrestled with my entire career is like trying to figure out because if you back up, you look at all these different symptoms of failure, there's so many things you can point to when we're doing like an expert witness engagement, which for those that don't know, an expert witness is someone that will analyze a failure that has gotten to litigation. The courts will hire independent experts like us to come in that's not affiliated with software vendors and can give an objective view. We'll come in and analyze these failures. And it means that we have to review every single document, every single deliverable, every single work product, even emails back and forth between team members. We're reviewing tons and tons of massive amounts of detail to piece together sort of it's almost like a crime scene. You're reassembling like you would see on a crime TV show. You're taking all this forensic evidence and you're analyzing what happened, what went wrong, who did what led to the failure, et cetera, et cetera. And in these cases, you'll see all these symptoms like, for example, the team customized the software too much, or we didn't have a good program manager, or we picked the wrong software. The software didn't do what we wanted it to do. And there's all these symptoms, and you could list dozens of symptoms usually at the time you analyze any failure, any troubled project that we might help recover. So throughout my career, I've tried to figure out what is the real root cause, because it can't be that everyone's making just tons and tons of mistakes across the board. There has to be some sort of root cause that's leading to all these other things, because people are inherently smart. I mean, people aren't, as unintelligent as they might seem when you go back and look in retrospect at these projects. And so I've really struggled to narrow it down to one, but if I didn't narrow it down, I've really narrowed it down to three root causes that are outlined in the book. And if I had to narrow it down to three root causes that typically lead to all the other stuff, one is to have unrealistic expectations. So there's a misunderstanding oftentimes of what it actually takes to go through a change initiative that isn't just about putting in new technology, because usually just putting in technology is just one piece of the overall equation. So it's more than that. And so most companies, though, don't recognize or understand what else there is that needs to happen to be successful. They focus myopically on the technology. And so that creates this unrealistic expectation that happens in these projects. A second root cause would be internal misalignment. So internally, we're not all on the same page. We're all going in different directions, and we're at the same time trying to manage this change initiative when we at the top of the organization or as a leadership team, we can't even agree on what this initiative means or how it's going to help our business going forward. And so that misalignment internally creates a lot of problems, a lot of conflicting opinions, a lot of slowdown in decision making and whatnot, which leads to a third root cause, which is slow decision making. And this is one that I actually recently added to my top list. I used to just have the first two, but then I added this third one. Actually, I'll have to give credit to someone else for this, and that is Hans Mulder is a professor out of Europe. I think it's the University of Antwerp, and he's part of the Standish Group as well. And the Standish Group is an analyst firm that he's part of, and they put out a chaos report, is what it's called, and it's where they analyze academically and quantitatively. They analyze tens of thousands of different digital transformation and ERP projects over the last few decades, and they look at these case studies to look at what was done well, what wasn't done well, which ones failed, which ones were successful. And they found that the number one correlation between success and failure was what they call decision latency. And that's essentially how fast an organization can make a decision. And if an internal team is not aligned, they're not going to be able to make decisions quickly because they're going to disagree on what the priorities are, what the focus should be. And when you can't make decisions quickly in these projects, that pushes everything out because the vendor or the system integrator is waiting on you to tell them what you want done. How do you want the software to work? Because even with pre-configurations and SaaS cloud options and standard workflows and whatnot, they're still fairly flexible and robust to where you have to decide what you want the software to do or what you don't want it to do. And that decision-making process tends to slow things down, especially when you haven't prepared or taken the time up front to plan for the project. So those are really the three things I'd say, that decision latency, misaligned, internal misalignment, and then unrealistic expectations. Those are the three core root causes if I had to point to three. And typically those three things will then lead to a lot of the other symptoms that we talk about. The project manager can't keep things on track because the decision-making is slow. Even change management becomes a challenge because we're not aligned internally. And so therefore the change initiative is failing too. So then the change management team looks bad because they can't figure out how to get people on board with the changes because the internal team's not aligned. So there's a lot of prescriptive solutions to those root causes, but those root causes, if not addressed, will cause all these other problems that sort of trickle down throughout the project.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely makes sense. One question that I have pertaining specifically to the case studies that are in the book, with so many being in there, I'm sure some of them surprised you. So which one surprised you the most as you were researching and writing this book?
There's a few. I mean, and actually, when I was researching this, there were case studies I'd never heard of, and a lot of them are public sector or big private sector organizations. But I'd say probably the biggest one I could think of is probably just a more recent one, and it's probably I have a bit of recency bias here because it is something that I recently wrote about and did a video about, and that is the SAAQ in Canada, which is the auto insurance board in Quebec, Canada, and they had a close to $1 billion spent on this digital transformation they've been working on for years. And what was really fascinating about it is it's probably the most extreme example I've seen, not only in terms of the amount of money and resources spent and wasted on this project, but also the impact it had on citizens in Quebec, as far as not being able to renew their licenses or get the insurance they needed, whatever, to do something that's a basic day-to-day need. That was part of why this one surprised me so much. But what surprised me even more is what happened after the failure. And I think this is still an ongoing thing right now as we speak, is that their offices of this SAEQ and the project team were recently raided by investigators. So they had investigators go in and sweep the offices and take documents, and almost like a criminal investigation of sorts. I haven't been able to figure out what exactly they're looking for or what's going on. But anytime you have federal law enforcement coming in to raid an office related specifically to a project like this, you have to wonder if there's more than just poor management. Maybe there's something else going on. And so, that brings up maybe a close second or a tie, if you will, to another case I was involved with. It wasn't quite as big financially, but it was super sketchy in terms of what was going on behind the scenes. This was a private sector organization. I was actually an expert witness for this case. And it was probably tens of millions of dollars spent. So not a tiny amount of money, but not nearly as big as SAAQ. And this one was in the United States. So in the United States, there was this project that I testified in this case, and what had happened is the person that was the project manager for the overall transformation, they worked for the implementing organization, so the end client, but they worked for that end client as sort of a interim contractor type of employee or type of team member. And so that person was a contractor, and he had a relationship with this system integrator, this technical implementer that sold a certain software. It was kind of a niche software solution, and they had services to go with it. And this guy worked out a deal where he got a kickback from bringing that third party in to do the work that he was there to manage. And so he made something like, if I remember correctly, I think it was 1.1 or 1.2 million dollars just on the kickback that he got from the software vendor. And then the client themselves were paying this guy hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I don't remember exactly what his salary was, but it was a lot of money. But he actually made a lot more money by recommending his buddy that had this backroom deal worked out with him. And what happened is we found through emails and through some of the forensic analysis that he was actually in cahoots with the guy to try and extend the project, to expand scope, to slow things down because it was costing the company more money. So this guy was totally mismanaging the company's resources of the company that hired him to come in to manage the project. And his loyalty was to the guy that was paying over $1 million. So that one was super weird. I'd never seen anything quite like that. I'd say those are probably the two biggest and most shocking case studies that I've seen so far. And just as a disclaimer too, by the way, neither of these were third stage clients, except for the fact that we later on ended up being an expert witness in one of those cases.
Wow, that is super shocking. Like you said, definitely unique experiences there for sure. We do have a question from the audience here that I want to show that I think would be good to answer. It says, wondering, Eric, I expect these case studies are largely from your own experience, or did you add some case studies from abroad as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. Both. So yes, it was, some of them were from my experience in the, one of the ones I just mentioned was from my own experience. The other one is just public record. So if you go out and Google SAAQ, I think it's called SAAQ Click, CLIC is the name of the project or the product that they were implementing. That's a public record sort of thing. So you can go out and read all about it, yourself, because the good thing with the public sector is a lot of times what they do with government agencies is they'll do these independent audit reports, usually after the fact and usually after things have completely hit the fan, usually way too late. But, at some point someone demands transparency and demands answers of why did we waste all this taxpayer money on this project? So then, some oversight board or whatever will bring in an auditor to come in and review these. The good thing with those audits is they do get into a lot of detail and they'll reveal a lot of information to the public that you typically won't get in the private sector. So I did pull in a lot of case studies from the public sector. We have a lot of clients in government and public sector as well as private sector. So a lot of the private sector examples are our own case studies, although there are some big, massive publicly traded companies that will have similar transparency sorts of information available. And then I pull a lot from the government, public government case studies as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super. I feel like it's going to be a nice mix and definitely useful to businesses. And it'll apply to something for each business out there that's looking to go through a digital transformation. But one thing I know you talk about, I got a little sneak peek into the book. And one thing that was talked about in there is about how fast-paced disruption can overwhelm organizations. What are some warning signs leaders should watch for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is something that has really resonated with me in the last probably 3 or 5 years. In having done this for so long, it's interesting to look back and reflect on how my views have evolved and changed with technology, with the world, but also just with experience and having, more and more experience, not just of my own, but as our team has grown at third stage, we've done so many different projects that I can learn from as well, even if I'm not directly involved with them. So it's been a really good, rich source of learnings and lessons and whatnot. And that's informed a lot of the way we've refined our methodology over time as well. But one of the big trends or kind of evolutions in how we do business and one of the common challenges we see that's becoming more and more prevalent with clients is that the technology, it's almost like a hockey stick now. Like technology's always changed pretty quickly, but now it's just changing so quickly, especially with AI and composable ERP and low code, no code. Cloud obviously totally disrupted the space, 10 to 20 years ago. But now you throw AI into the mix, BI, analytics, all this cool stuff that's out there technically. That technology change curve, that hockey stick, is not at all close to what an average organization is able to consume. So if you kind of imagine a chart here, you've got like the technology change going like, whoops, how can I do this? I'm trying to do this backwards on the camera here. It kind of goes like that. But the average organization ability to change is holding pretty steady. Maybe even if they increase a little bit, it's more of a slope, And so that chasm is becoming bigger over time, between technology and what technology can do and what organizations can actually consume and change. And so that's part of the jungle theme in the book, is exasperating the problems in the jungle, because now the chasm between where we are today and where we could be with new technology is just growing. And with that longer journey between current state and future state comes more risk, comes more pain, comes more chaos, comes more time and money and resources. And so that's why I think, one of the philosophies that I typically espouse is sort of contradictory to the fact that I'm a technical consultant and we're technology consultants. And that is, sometimes you need to back off the technology, like just chill out on the technology, because that stuff is just going to change so fast. It's so much more than you can ever consume anytime soon. So why not focus more incrementally on what could you do now? What are some of the low-hanging fruit ways that you could incrementally change, especially if you're a risk-averse organization, or if your culture just doesn't support big, massive amounts of change, or maybe you don't have the bandwidth or the focus or the resources to be able to invest heavily in the amount of change that's going to be required. That's okay. Instead of just forcing it because a vendor wants you to buy more software, do what you need to do for your business. And that might mean backing off the technology, looking ahead to what could be in the future and understanding that, but recognizing it may take you 5 to 10 or more years to get there. And you don't want to necessarily wait 5 to 10 years to get that advantage. So why not do something now? One example that we see that's really common now, and this is a really important off ramp that a lot of companies have that they don't recognize because the industry doesn't necessarily want them to think this way. And that is, you don't have to overhaul your entire back office ERP systems to take advantage of AI. And that's something that a lot of ERP software vendors would have you believe, because they want you to buy the biggest, fanciest, newest cloud SaaS solution so that you can also buy the AI agents and the AI solutions that they're building in their flagship software. And that's going to make them a lot more money. But there's a lot of third-party options out there, a lot of different ways you could take advantage of AI and analytics and BI, and get some big lifts to your current technology stack without necessarily having to completely overhaul your back office systems. And so that's one of the things that we talk about to our clients is, hey, it's okay if you're not, just because a vendor is telling you they're sunsetting their product, or that you can't take advantage of AI unless you upgrade to our latest and greatest. That might be true for them and the way they operate, but there's tons of other options out there. And so I think the good news in all of this is that buyers have a lot of options, and they actually have all the leverage. They just don't know it. They have all the leverage, or they should have all the leverage, but the vendors are trying to stiff arm them into pushing these migrations and pushing these upgrades prematurely. And it is just amazing to me. Just this week, I've talked to three new potential clients that have come to us in frustration because of their frustration with SAP in particular. They're saying that SAP, they don't like the way they're forcing them into, Rise with SAP and forcing them into these S/4HANA upgrades, and when ECC is just working just fine. And so many of these clients tell us ECC is a good product. There's nothing wrong with it. We haven't gotten the full value out of it yet. Why would we spend millions or tens of millions of dollars on an S/4HANA upgrade when we have a perfectly fine system right here? And so SAP will do things. And it's not just SAP. SAP, I would say, is probably the biggest culprit, or the biggest abuser of their leverage. But all the vendors do it to some degree, or a lot of the vendors do it to some degree. But they try to force you into thinking that I can't take advantage of Joule, for example. Joule is SAP's AI solution. They'll say, well, you can't take advantage of Joule unless you go with S/4HANA and move to S/4HANA. And by the way, we're going to cut off support for ECC in 2030. So they do these stiff arm tactics like that to try and force you into thinking they have the leverage, but the reality is they don't. You have the leverage because you have third party support options. You have companies like Rimini Street and Spinnaker and others that can provide third party support at least till 2040. So you can set aside the notion that you have to upgrade by 2030. You can use third-party AI options. Like that's why Palantir and Snowflake have done so well lately, is because they are sort of these third-party AI workflow integration solutions that don't require you to necessarily overhaul your entire back office systems. But the problem is a lot of buyers don't realize they have this leverage. They have these options that SAP and other vendors don't want you to know about. So that's been our experience, is that that chasm between what technology can do and what you can or should be doing in the short term are two very different things, and it's just important to understand what the risks are of both scenarios or both options. We're here talking about my new book called Welcome to the Jungle. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I don't mind letting you down easy, but just give it time.
I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation. And you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 236. This is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is a tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with their digital transformation journeys, and it's produced by Major Tom Productions. So be sure to reach out if you have questions about how you can collaborate with us on the show. In the meantime, we're here talking about my new book called Welcome to the Jungle.
Kind of circling back to the AI topic, what role do you see AI playing in the future for digital transformation?
Well, I think it's twofold. I mean, one is AI as an enabler for the companies to be more efficient, more effective at the end of the day. So being able to automate their supply chains and consume mass amounts of information and analyze mass amounts of information. AI is perfect for that. AI is a great tool for that, especially when you get into some of the generative stuff too, as well. If I can use generative AI to do something better and faster than my current team can do on their own without the tool set, that's a great thing. But there's also the dimension of how AI is affecting implementations, and this is what I'm super fascinated by too, because this might sound like a contradictory, weird thing to do as an owner of a technology consulting firm, but we've created a tool set called Mission Control AI that enables and speeds up implementations themselves. So we can now use this tool set to throttle back the amount of money that's required to spend on consultants, including us, by the way. So it's actually reducing our average deal size, is bringing down the amount of time it takes us to do stuff, which in the short term actually harms us. But in the long term, we know that's something, first of all, that's just where the industry is going to end up at some point anyway. So we might as well be the first to get there. And second of all, our clients are a lot happier because we can charge them less money than our competitors. We can do things better because we have AI enabling, we have AI in addition to some really smart people, and that's a pretty deadly, powerful combination. But the problem is especially these big SIs, the big consulting firms, they have a lot to lose by AI enabling too much of this digital transformation side of things, because they rely so much on mass armies of people, either young kids and or offshore resources that'll do stuff like configuration and development, documentation, creating deliverables, taking notes in meetings. There's all this stuff that's very menial type work, but it ends up being high cost for clients because they're paying by the hour for this type of stuff. So by us using Mission Control AI, not only for ourselves to manage ourselves and our client resources, we're also using it to manage system integrators. We're able to say, no, now the client can take control and say, look, I don't need you, the system integrator, to give me 100 people full-time on this project. Maybe I only need 30 people now, because those other 70 people were doing grunt work that AI can largely do for me, or at least get started. Now, this is bad news for people that are starting off their careers. It's not going to create as much opportunity for these entry-level consultants that was the traditional model. And that's how I started too, is you start off as a young 20-something, you have no experience, you go into a big consulting firm along with 50 or 100 other people on a project, you sort of get lost in the mix, and you can do some low-level stuff, bill a lot of money for it, and no one really bats an eye because you've got 100 other people on the project. So that model, I think, is going to die pretty quickly, especially as more and more system integrators recognize the importance or how much disruption AI can have on the implementations.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit and go back to kind of what you emphasized earlier about what you talk about in the book, which a couple of those things are culture and change management, and how you emphasize them as very critical in digital transformation. How do those factors outweigh technology itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's if I had to overinvest or risk overinvesting in one side of the equation, I'd say overinvesting in change management is going to serve you really well. For too long, too often, organizations overinvested in the technology itself. They would spend all this time and money just trying to get the technology to work, largely because they were sold, low. Back to my point about low expectations or unrealistic expectations. They were sold a bill of goods that made them believe that the technology could be deployed faster and cheaper than it really could. So then they end up spending all this extra budgetary money on just getting the technology to work, and then they've got no money left over to focus on change management, the process improvement, data migration, the architecture, the integration to other systems, all this other stuff that's really important. But we blew our budget and then some on the core technology because we never had a realistic budget or realistic understanding to begin with, and or the system integrator and the vendors blew the budget for us. So that all being said, if I were to flip the script and say, I'd much rather see a company come out of it and say, man, I spent a little bit too much on change management, which, by the way, I've yet to hear a single client ever in my entire career say that. And if anyone out there disagrees with me, I'd love to hear it, because I'd love to meet that one person out there that says, you know what, I had this one project one time where we spent too much time and money on change management. We spent too much time on the human side of change. We should have spent more money on the technology. I don't imagine that person exists, but if they do, I'd love to hear from them. Maybe they're in the audience here today. And by the way, I'd love to hear from the audience too, just in the conversation here going in the chat. What do you think the most important keys to success are? And I'd love to, compare notes with what's in the book and hear your feedback on it too. But back to your question, Darian, about why the change is so important and so much more important than technology. It's just because the technology doesn't matter without the people adapting to the technology and figuring out innovative ways to use the technology to make the business better. You could do the opposite though. You could actually have crappy tools, but really good change management and good adoption. And that's probably going to be a much more effective end result, is with crappy technology, but really good change management, really good process improvement. Even if you can't improve the process quite as much as you could with better technology, at least you've made some progress and you've made some material changes to your business. If you integrate the data better, if you clean up your data better, you integrate systems better, if you do all that stuff really well, but you have a crappy core ERP system, you're probably still way better off than the company that bought a better ERP system, spent more money on it, but didn't spend enough time on the adoption. That I'll put money, and I don't like to bet, but if I did, I would always put money on the company with the crappy tech that invested a lot more in the people and process side of things.
Yeah, we have a couple good questions here in the audience that I want to pull up. This first one being, Eric, you often say how crucial the phase zero is in implementation process. Why, in your opinion, do companies neglect this stage and assume that technology will solve everything? Do you currently notice a greater shift from your client side towards paying more attention to this stage?
Yeah. In fact, I just had yesterday, yesterday late in the day, it was the last meeting of the day that I had. It was with a new big construction client in the US. And they just approached us with a big ERP upgrade that they're doing. And they talked about how they skipped phase zero. And now looking back, they recognized why they skipped phase zero. And I thought they expressed it brilliantly, because it was them on the front lines making this decision at the time, and it made total sense. And it's something we've seen with other clients too. And that is, when you finally get to that point of evaluating your options and defining, what are we going to do? Are we going to upgrade our current technology to a newer version? Or are we going to rip it out and put in a new system? Whatever that roadmap is, you get a certain amount of agreement, excitement, momentum, and people see light at the end of the tunnel. They think, oh, thank God, finally, this old crappy system that we have is going away. We have something better that's coming. And oh, finally, we can stop worrying about the vendor sunsetting the product and not having maintenance in a few years. Now we finally have a path forward. And so there's this huge amount of excitement and momentum internally that oftentimes blinds people to what you're about to get into. And then you add to the fact, yet to add insult to injury, then you have the vendors and the technical implementers as they're saying, yeah, let's go. We can get a team out there next week. Time's ticking. Let's get going. We can be out there to do the kickoff on Monday. And no one really says no to that. You think, okay, that's great. We're excited. Let's go. We don't want to lose time. And so that human blind spot and bias is to spring into action. Like, we feel like we need to let's start building the technology, when the reality is what you need to do is stop the technology and do the planning, like figure out what you want your processes to be, what you want the change strategy to be, how you're going to integrate these different systems, how you're going to migrate the data, what are the gaps in that system you're about to deploy, because there are gaps and there's deficiencies. No technology is perfect. How are you going to solve that? What are those gaps? And thinking about that stuff is not nearly as cool or fun as thinking about, let's just get going on the project. And so no one really wants to stop to think about that stuff, because it's not nearly as sexy. It's not nearly as tangible, and you can't see it right now. I can see the technology. The vendor's going to bring it to me. It's going to flip a switch for me to start playing in the sandbox, to go start building stuff. And that sounds cool and fun, especially if I'm a CIO or an IT person. So that's the dynamic that so many companies go through. And it's really hard to reverse. But the companies that have been through it, they almost always look back and say, even in some cases, we've had clients that said, we watch your videos. In some cases, we even hired third stage. You told us we should have done the phase zero and we didn't. And now we regret it and wish we would have. And it happens all the time. And a lot of times clients come back to us. They might even turn down our services for phase zero and then come back to us later for project remediation to fix the problem that was then created. And I can tell you that it's always a lot cheaper just to do phase zero. It saves you so much time and money. A company that does phase zero is always going to implement faster and cheaper than the company that skips through phase zero. That company that skips through phase zero may think they're getting ahead, but they're actually falling behind. It's almost like a marathon. If you're running a marathon and you see, or if you're running a 10K or whatever the race is, a long distance race, you see that person that just comes off the blocks, just sprinting at a full speed. That person is going to be winning for a while, maybe the first mile of the race or the first kilometer of the race or whatever. But eventually the ones that are the steady, the ones that are trained, the ones that have trained for endurance, all that stuff, those guys and gals are going to pass that sprinter every time. And that's a lot like what happens in these projects. When you skip phase zero, you're just like that guy or person that's going out in a full-on sprint on a marathon. You're going to run out of steam pretty quick, and it's going to get ugly, and you're going to get sick and throw up, and need to get out of the race, or whatever the metaphor or analogy would be for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great question too from our audience here is, how about AI governance over the SI to keep them in check along the implementation journey, acting in PMO fashion on behalf of the client's interest of getting the best solution delivered at a cost competitive price?
Yeah, great point. And that is so important. And that's a really important, hard to see benefit and advantage of having an independent tech agnostic advisor that can help you and only represent you, the client, not the vendor, not the system integrator, because the system integrator has system integrators have two conflicts of interest. They're very, very important and very destructive and disruptive to the end client. And those loyalties are to the vendor themselves. So if I'm an SI that represents or partners with SAP or Microsoft or Oracle, Workday, whoever, my loyalty is really to that software vendor, because that's the hand that feeds. That they're the ones that feed me leads. They're the ones that I make commission off of when I sell more of their software. They're the ones that reward me when I become a platinum partner because I could sell more software. So right there's a conflict of interest. I'm actually working for the vendor, not you, the end client, if I'm an SI. The other conflict of interest is more internal to the SI, and that is I have a vested interest in getting as many people staffed on this project as possible. And if I have someone overseeing me, I can't quite do that, because then people start asking questions like, why do I have so many people on this project? Why did, if I go back to 1998, someone probably should have said, why is this kid Eric, who has no experience, why is he on this project charging $200 an hour? He's doing absolutely nothing that adds any real value. At least, and that was true for the first year or so that I was in business. Clients did not need to be paying what they were paying for me to do what I did. I know what I did. I liked what I did, but I always felt bad because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm not even working full time, but I'm expected to mosey around at this client and bill time no matter what I'm doing. And so I always wonder, why is no one asking, like, why are we paying this kid so much money? But no one ever said a thing. So anyway, I was part of the problem back in the day. It sounds hypocritical in some ways because that's how I started my career, and that put me on a trajectory to where I am now. But I also look back and recognize that was not good for the clients. And so I think having that independent advisor to say, why is this kid on the project? Maybe he only needs to be on half time. Maybe he only needs to be on for a month, not for 6 months or whatever it is. Those are the kinds of questions that you need someone on your side asking and rationalizing, because if you're not an expert and you don't know what questions to ask. I mean, it's like if you went to, have a house built and you just had an open checkbook and the general contractor just tells you, don't worry about it. We'll bring in all the people we need. And you don't ask any questions. You just say, okay, well, we're going over budget, but you're the expert. You just tell us what you need from us, financially. You wouldn't do that if you're building a house or any other big project. So I don't know why you would do it with a project like this. So having that independent oversight and management of the SI is really important. And that's also just part of the overall PMO that you should own internally, because your internal PMO needs to manage the SI. Your SI should not be managing you and your resources. If you're doing that, that's just completely, that project is just not going to go well. And so, but that's what the SIs want. They want complete control, because then they have complete control of the budget. They can make more money from you. You don't ask as many questions. You get this learned helplessness to rely on them, and it just doesn't go well.
Yeah, absolutely. To kind of circle back, I want to get a couple last questions in here about your book before we run out of time. This one I have is, what's one lesson from the book that you wish every CEO or CIO would take to heart before starting a transformation?
I think the overall lesson would be to just stop and think and take ownership of the project, because I see this dynamic way too much, even for some really talented, successful leaders. There's a tendency to say, I know I want this certain product. I know I need to update or modernize my IT systems, and I'm just going to go out and find the best vendor, the best system integrator, and I'm going to let them do their thing. And they don't really stop to think, well, what exactly do I want from this project? What do I want to use the vendor for? What kind of improvements am I really trying to make to my business? What kind of priorities do I have to improve my business? They don't stop to think and ask a lot of those questions. And they don't stop to think, how am I going to manage this contractor? Because really, a vendor and a system integrator, they're contractors that work for you. You need to manage them. But too often these big companies, and these are, it fascinates me that it happens at some really big Fortune 500, Fortune 100, multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies. They just will sort of back off and just let the vendors and the system integrators do their thing without owning it, without managing it and having the accountability behind it. But yet these same leaders, when they go to do an acquisition or they go to open a new plant or a new distribution center, they don't do that at all. They take complete ownership. They have complete understanding of what needs to be done. Even if they're not technically proficient in whatever the acquisition is or how to build a factory, they still are very involved. But when it comes to these tech projects, it's almost like they get scared and say, well, I'm not a tech person. That's what the experts are for. We'll just let them do their thing. So I just say take ownership. And you have to find a way, even if you don't know. Some of the most successful people, by the way, that have been the best at managing the vendors are the ones that know the least amount about technology, but they know their business really well. And they know so little about technology, it actually in some ways helps them, because they can call BS on stuff a lot faster, because they can say, I don't really care about technology. What I care about is what's it going to do to my business. And they have more of a black and white, either it's going to help or it's not sort of mentality. And I think that's super healthy. Because then, when the technologists all come out and say, you should be doing this or that, or you need this additional module to add your stack, or you need some additional licenses here, and you should force fit your business into the technology over here, you can stop and call BS on that rather than driving it from a technology perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great piece of advice for sure. And one question, where are people able to order your book from once it is live?
Yeah, but it'll be available on Amazon. So we'll actually have a website up shortly called welcometothejunglebook.com, but it'll also be available on Amazon. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll certainly blast it out to the world, once the release date is set, which should be any time. I was actually hoping the release date would be set by today, but it's not yet, but it'll be very soon. It's early part of September. It'll be available to purchase physically or electronically or both. And again, if you're coming to Stratosphere 2025, which is next week, if you're able to join in Denver or virtually, you can join by scanning the QR code at the top left side of your screen, just to the left of Darian's head. You can see a QR code that you can, there you go, that you can scan there. And you can, again, join virtually. If you can't be in every single session, you'll get recordings. You'll get access to the recordings after the fact. We're streaming it, professionally filming and streaming it. And even better, if you can be there in person. We still have a few seats. We're almost full in person, but we do have a few seats available in Denver. If you'd like to join, there's still a few open. So love to see you there. You can learn more, see the pricing, and use what's the discount code that we can share with our audience here? Darian, I can't remember it. Is it early bird? Is it just
I think there is an early bird discount code still out there. Yeah. Early bird. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you book now, you're not at all an early bird. You're a late bird, but we don't have a discount code for late birds. We just have the early bird one that we can still share with the audience here, but just use the discount code early bird to get, I think it's 20% off the registration pass. So yeah. So anyway, so that's really looking forward to that. And there will be, I'll do a bigger reveal on what's in the book and what some of the key themes are of the book in that session. It's not just me, by the way. I have one of the keynotes. In the title of my keynote is "Welcome to the Jungle," and I'm going to talk about, some of a summary of lessons from the book. But there's about a dozen or more other speakers that you get to see as well. A lot of software vendors are sponsoring and taking part in the event as well. So companies like IFS and Priority Software, NetSuite, Epicor, to name just a few. Taft Law will be there as well. They're a law firm that specializes in technology litigation and contracts and stuff like that. So a lot of good speakers and sponsors, and it's also really good peer networking too. So it's a great way just to learn from other people that are going through the same thing you are. A lot of people leave this event feeling like they're a little less crazy, like they're a little less alone, and they're a little less crazy, because they always think they're the only ones going through this, and they must be crazy. They must be doing something wrong. And then you meet, 100 other people that are doing the same thing or running into the same challenges, and you realize, okay, we're all in this together, and we can solve these challenges. So that's a great event. So hope to see you there. And be sure to keep an eye out for the book as well. All right. So that's a bit about my book. Keep an eye out for it. We'll for sure let you know where to buy it once it's released. We'll keep you posted here on this podcast, but look for that here in the next few weeks. Available on Amazon, wherever in the world you are. You can buy it electronically. You can also get hardcover or soft cover copies as well. That'll all be available very shortly. So I hope you enjoyed the preview in the meantime. And speaking of preview, we're going to shift gears and talk about a preview of a company you may not have heard of yet. It's a tech startup. It's an AI tech startup that we actually work closely with. We're partners with this company, and they provide the AI solutions that we use to help our clients through their digital transformations. It's called Mission Control AI. It's a tool set that they actually created the back-end technology that we use. And then, of course, we own all the IP with our client deliverables and work product and methodologies. And we're as we speak, training their AI tool so that other clients going forward can benefit from all the learnings collectively that we have as a company, over 400 plus different implementations over the last 7 years of being a business. But in the meantime, we thought it'd be really cool to have them on the show and talk about what it's like being inside a tech startup. So let's bring them on the show here in just a moment. But first, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola.
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 236. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski, and we have an exciting segment we're going to talk about here today. We're going to talk about what it's like starting and running an AI tech startup. So we're going to play you this YouTube video where they're actually at our offices recently, and we actually got it all on film. We actually walked around with the two of them, the two founders of the company, or it's actually two of the three founders of the company, I believe it is. I believe there's one other founder, but they were both here in Denver, and we talked about what it's like starting an AI company, a tech company, what it's like running it, scaling it, getting private equity money, finding new customers, all the stuff, the trials and tribulations that go along with a tech startup. So let's roll this clip from my YouTube channel. We'll come back and talk about it. And joining me to have this conversation about what it takes to start a new tech company is Will and Xenon from Octor. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
So what's fascinating about what you guys are doing is that you started an AI company, an AI tech company, and AI is all the rage right now. Tech has been all the rage for years now. What's first of all, tell us about Octor and what you guys do as a company.
Yeah. So what we do is we help system integrators implement complex and requirement-heavy software. So you think your big ERP systems, CPM, CRM systems. We really help expedite that process of those implementations for system integrators for their end customers, right? More specifically, what we're doing is we're bringing AI into the mix to really help with that initial discovery and design phase around requirement gathering, documentation, artifact creation, right before configuration, but ultimately helping streamline the end-to-end implementation process to really increase that or decrease that time to value for the end customer.
Okay. Now, how did you guys meet? How do you know each other before Octor?
Yeah, so Will and I and our two other co-founders, we all met in college. So we went to Johns Hopkins together. We all studied computer science. So that's where we met. And we're all very good friends. And we all have our own sort of stories, but we've all really been into building software. We've had our, previous startups in some capacities in the past. And then we all came together to build Octa.
Cool. So you came together to build Octa shortly after college. How did this happen? How did the idea percolate in your heads and turn into reality?
Yeah. I mean, I think like building for system integrators, like having that idea in college as a college student, like when I work with our customers, like it's always the natural question, like where did you get this idea from, right? Like what experience did you draw from? And it was pretty serendipitous. So while I was studying computer science at Hopkins, I also worked in software private equity. And so I was just actually having a conversation with a mid-market private equity firm. And what happened was their only asset class that they invested in were system integrators, those that implemented particular softwares in various ecosystems. So they would invest in a Snowflake system integrator, a ServiceNow, a Salesforce. And that really got me thinking. I was like, wow, this is a big enough market for this private equity firm to only invest in this one asset class. But not only that, at the same time, I have a buddy of mine, I'm originally from Ohio, who's a software engineer at Deloitte. And around that same time, he had recently gotten staffed on a 3-year-long ERP implementation for the state of Illinois. And oh my goodness, right? Every time I called him, there was always something, right? And he, not like, these big GSIs, they're great at doing these implementations, but there are definitely inefficiencies in their processes. And so every time I had the conversation, there's always something. And so it really got me thinking, okay, this is a really big market, and there's definitely inefficiencies. And right around this time was also when these foundation models have gotten really, really good. And so we're like, okay, what can we do here to really build something purpose-built for this particular industry? And we came together.
Right. That's very cool. And it's a industry that's definitely ripe for disruption. And you recognize that. And now you're using technology to disrupt this industry, which honestly has been long overdue. It's been a long time coming.
Yes, I think that's definitely the feedback we've gotten. I got off a call maybe 3 days ago, and after we did the demo and kind of talk logistics, the person was like, "Thank you for saving system integrators." And I was like, "Okay, well,
Right.
yeah, here we go."
You're fixing an entire industry and all their customers too.
Yes. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really helping the customers ultimately realize the value of these large enterprise softwares much faster, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that they have actually a pleasant experience with these transformations. Like you more than anyone know that a lot of these times these transformations fail, like they don't even work. And so actually, I learned a lot of that from your videos. So
Yeah. So, one of the things that I find fascinating is I think a lot of times people have a really glamorous view of a startup. I think, all right, you get all this private equity or venture capital money and you're just rolling in the cash and you're up at the top in your ivory tower building a company. But I saw you post on LinkedIn recently what an average work week looks like, and it's not quite as glamorous as it sounds. It's cool, and it's super exciting to watch your journey, but what's it really like in the average week or work day for you guys?
Yeah, I would say the rough schedule is we wake up, eat breakfast, work, eat lunch, work, eat dinner, sleep, and rinse and repeat. So, and like the way we keep it sustainable is that we're all super passionate about what we're building, and since we have customers, we're very passionate about solving these problems that our customers have and supporting them better than anyone else, any other vendor. We want to be the best vendor our customers have as well. And I think just this market as a whole and all of the insights we've gained from customers, leaders like yourself that we've spoken to, just motivate us to keep going. And we're just doing the work of our lives. That's how we feel. So that's what keeps us going every single day.
yeah, and I think even more anecdotally, it's staying very close to the customer, right? So we have like an internal culture of okay, we get pinged by our customer, we want to get back within like 15 minutes, right? And there was an anecdote where we have a customer that's overseas. And so there was one time we were driving up for a conference the next day that we were sponsoring, and this customer, had some points of feedback that they wanted, additional features on, or things that they wanted to talk through. And so on the way up to that conference, it was about a 2-hour drive. It was like 1 a.m. Because it was overseas, and we stopped at a conference. It was about a 2-hour drive. It was like 1 a.m. Because it was overseas, and we stopped at a Denny's. And we sat down with our computers. The engineering team was building out a new feature, and I was on the phone talking to the customer at like 1:30 till like 2:30 at Denny's, while we ate a burger, and then we drove back up to the conference. And so it's things like that where it's like you're not finding that in corporate life. Like it's very much stay super scrappy, very agile, very fast, and being customer obsessed, I think is the biggest thing that we've learned.
Right. And you also, I've seen you post on LinkedIn some of your adventures on the road where you guys are, I think I don't know if it's easy and on, or one of you were in a bathroom in a hotel taking a conference call while someone else is in a conference call in another room. And you guys are just total bootstrapping, getting stuff done, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've had multiple instances where Will and I were at a conference. Will's taking a call from the, living room of the hotel, and then I'm in the bathroom using the sink as a makeshift conference room, and then, we switch in between us. And that's just the things we have to do sometimes to make sure we're there to support our customers, whether it's a customer call or a call with a prospect who's looking to really embrace AI in their own organization.
So what's been the hardest part of starting this company and growing and scaling it like you are now?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is, I would say there's two pretty hard things that we're experiencing, especially as we scale with the demand that we're seeing. The number one is hiring, right? It's before we started the company, every entrepreneur, every founder that I've talked to, when I asked them what's the hardest part about starting a company, they always diverted it to hiring, like building the team, and I couldn't agree more now. Right? Like, especially at the early stages of a company where everything is so critical, being super customer obsessed is the number one thing. Like, finding someone that has those same values, the same drive of creating a category defining company, that's like honestly pretty hard to find. And what we've seen is like, it's not just about what's on paper, right? Someone can have a great resume, a good hard skill set, but like the belief in creating a company that's, generational that's something that you have to find. And so, hiring, that's definitely been harder. And then the second thing is actually saying no sometimes, to customers, to prospects, and really make sure you're prioritizing the true ROI and the true value that you're trying to deliver to the customers. Because, you start delivering ROI, then customers will be like, oh, I actually want this tangential thing, or I want this other feature, or I want this thing. And yes, like we can continue doing that, but then that would spread us too thin and not allow us to deliver what we're truly delivering in terms of ROI for them. And that's really helping streamline their end-to-end implementation process, right? And as you continue to build more product and expand the team, then maybe you can start exploring those different things. But really staying laser focused sometimes entails, say no, right? And that's something that we've had to learn.
Yeah. What about your venture capital interest?
Yeah.
You've got venture capital money that you've raised, and they're starting to show interest in investing in the company.
Yeah.
How has that changed your strategy and trajectory overall?
Yeah, I think with funding, we're very lucky in the sense that our investors are very easy to work with. They're not necessarily forcing us to do anything or holding anything over our heads like the typical stories that you hear. And we feel very grateful that, our investors, they really just feel like partners. Like the other day, our partner came into our makeshift office in New York when we first moved there, and we had an entire session working through our go-to-market strategy, where things were at the product level, different strategic customers we wanted to acquire, and and I think if anything, getting this funding has just invigorated us in order to just keep moving forward, because for us, raising VC money isn't necessarily a milestone in the traditional sense. It's more so, okay, this is the fuel that we have to get to a continuous set of goals.
Right. Maybe take you a little further than you would have gone otherwise.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, what are your goals for the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you want to see the company go? Where do you think it'll go?
Yeah. I think for us, what we're really trying to do is redefine professional services and implementation delivery of enterprise software, right? We envision a paradigm shift of how software will get delivered for end customers, right? We're seeing, and we want to prioritize, and this is what you preach as well, is the end customer, right? They're the ones that are buying these softwares, looking to transform their enterprises. And so really shifting, that pull to them, and allowing these system integrators, allowing these professional services teams to deliver for the end customer better, faster, more aligned and streamlined. And so really capturing that end-to-end implementation process is where we're trending, right? Right now, we're starting is around the discovery and design, and then pre-sales to post-sales, but going deeper and deeper into the rest of the delivery process is, kind of where we see the company go.
Yeah, that's great. And it's almost like the whole center of gravity, the entire focus is shifting from technology and the system integrators doing system integration work for system integration's sake. Now it's shifting over to the companies themselves, the end companies that are trying to improve their businesses.
Exactly.
So that was the clip of Xenon, Will, and I talking about life inside a tech startup. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation, Darian?
Yeah, I really liked the conversation, especially just them showing like how hard it is actually to start a tech startup company, from like their Denny's 1 a.m. runs and conference calls in like hotel bathrooms, different things like that. It was super interesting to hear all of that. So that side of it was really nice to hear. And a few different things also stood out just about Octa AI in general. So one is they've obviously identified inefficiencies in system integration and used AI to solve them, proving that disruption. I feel like you talk about this with Jan Bond too, but it comes from like often lived experience of like, this is what we're experiencing and this is how we're going to fix it. And then other than that too, I also thought it was interesting when they said they see themselves redefining professional services and shifting the focus back to the end customers and not just the integrators. With all of that, Eric, I have a couple of follow-up questions from the conversation to go with that. So you've worked with countless system integrators. Do you think startups like Octa can really disrupt an SI model, or will big firms adapt fast enough to compete?
Well, that's a good question. On one hand, the big firms have more R&D dollars and resources at their disposal, but they're also slower to change. I think they're slower to adapt and respond. I mean, they are, to their credit, even the biggest vendors like SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, all these large enterprise tech incumbents are responding very quickly to AI. But the problem is that they're responding to it in a way that helps them further the value of their own technology, not necessarily looking with a fresh set of eyes of how AI could completely change the way a company thinks about technology. And those are two very different things. So in order for a company now to take full advantage of, for example, in the SAP world, there's Joule, which is their AI tool. You have to have SAP. You have to be on S/4HANA to use that. So in other words, you've got to go through the pain and the chaos and the disruption and the stress of a full-blown S/4HANA upgrade before you can take full advantage of some of these AI tools they're creating. Whereas an AI startup can say, hey, we've got this AI tool that plays nice in the sandbox with all sorts of technologies, and you don't necessarily need to rip out and replace your old ERP system to get the full advantage. And that's why companies like Palantir, Snowflake, Databricks, Rapid, which we talked about Jan Bond earlier in the show. He has a tech company now called Rapid, which is a low code, no code AI driven development tool that's meant to pull together different data sets and apps to create a seamless technology stack. That's why those companies are doing so well, is because they're giving customers a lower cost, lower risk, and just as effective alternative as the big guys. So I think those smaller companies are going to be more nimble and they're going to be less afraid to introduce an AI tool that could completely destroy an entire category, which is, I think, what will happen. And the same with Octa. What they're doing is really interesting because they have to convince a market that is actually going to hurt, that's going to be hurt by their technology in the short term. And that includes us. When we started using their tool, we recognized that they are automating a lot of our job. If they automate our job and we're billing by the hour, we're going to bill less hours, clients are going to pay less, we're going to make less, but our clients will be happier, presumably. And that's the hypothesis that we have. And at some point, we might stop charging on hours. We might start charging for value instead of hours worked. And so we've already accepted the fact that our model is going to get disrupted. So we might as well lead it and be part of the disruption rather than waiting for it to happen. But I think convincing an entire market, especially these really big consulting firms that have armies of dozens or hundreds of consultants on a single project, for them to look at that and say, what if I use AI and get rid of half that staff on that project? That means you got rid of half your revenue. And I don't know that a highly politicized big company with turf wars and egos and all the stuff that goes along with it, I don't know that they're going to embrace it quickly. I mean, I think over time they'll have to, but in the short term, I would think that's going to be one of the big challenges with startups like these guys.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. One of the main things they said that they're experiencing a challenge in is hiring. From your leadership and consulting experience, what traits should founders look for in those early stage hires?
I think a lot of it for them, is obviously they value hard work and grit and determination and things like that. You can just tell from talking to them and how they operate that people they hire tend to share those same values. So that, in other words, they're not the type of company that's right now going to go hire a bunch of people that, want a 9-to-5 work from home job if they feel like it, but they're not going to put in any more than 40 hours a week. They're just not going to, that's not the type of person they're going to want. And that's true for a lot of tech startups. You need people that are really energized and really focused and determined and, work hard, because that's the way you build a startup. I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, it's when a company gets bigger that they start to settle for, they get their own success going and then they start settling in comfort, okay, now I can start focusing more on work-life balance and, tons of vacation time, stuff that we value as employees or, as humans. But for a startup that's just getting going, you need to build that spark and you need that brute force and effort and smarts that goes into building a company. So I think that's a big part of what a startup like that would want to look for. And you also just need, even bigger picture than that, you just need people that are aligned, maybe have different skill sets than the founders have, but their values and their personalities are fairly well aligned. You need that cohesion early on with that core group of people that you start with. And that's been the case here at Third Stage as well. And it's, I assume, similar for them as a tech startup as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question. More broadly, what do you think that AI startups like this tell us about the future of enterprise software delivery?
Well, I think it tells us, first of all, that historically there's been a lot of waste in technology service delivery. And I think going forward, a lot of that waste will go away. And that's only going to benefit clients. It's going to hurt our industry, our direct services industry, consulting industry is going to be hurt in the short term. Long term, I think we'll be fine. It's probably going to look a lot different. You're probably not going to have these big, massive, mega consulting firms anymore, or they're going to have to pivot to something completely different. But I think overall as an industry, it's going to be fine. And I think at the end of the day, the end customers are the ones that will benefit the most. So I think there's a lot to look forward to. I'm curious to see where it goes for sure.
Yeah, same here.
Well, good stuff. Well, thanks for turning the tables on us earlier in the show and interviewing me, and then certainly your insights as always on the show with the newsworthy topics and some of the follow-up conversations. And thanks to the audience for the great questions. Thank you to Will and Xenon for being here in Denver to be part of that video that we shared with you. And thank you to the audience for listening here today. And new episodes every Wednesday, transformationgroundcontrol.com. If you want to chat more about your project that you're going through, your change initiatives, your transformation, you want to brainstorm ideas, bounce around ideas, or if you just like to learn how Third Stage can help you through your project, feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. So that's it for this week. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.